So you've already learned about sentence fragments, which of course was a fragment of a sentence, but not a complete sentence. Now we need to talk about sort of the opposite of that if we're talking about errors that a lot of students make when they're writing. We're going to talk about run-on sentences. So once again, a reminder, when we're studying grammar, we're just studying effective written communication. So when you're writing, your job is to communicate your thoughts in a way that's clear enough that anybody could pick it up, read it, and understand your meaning. And you want to be as clear about your meaning as possible. That's the point of writing, okay? And that's why writing can be hard for some people, because that's a big task. So, run-on sentences. We have to back up before we define what a run-on sentence is, and we have to define a couple of other things. The first thing we need to define is a clause. A clause is a group of words that contains both a verb and its subject, but it may or may not express a complete thought. Okay? So when we talked about the definition of a complete sentence, you remember we said it had to contain a verb, the verb's subject, and it had to express a complete thought. But a clause may or may not express a complete thought. So a clause could be a complete sentence on its own, or maybe not, depending on this last part here. So we need to define that, and then we need to define a conjunction. You've probably heard the term conjunction, if not learned directly what it is in the past. When I was a kid, on Saturday mornings, there were cartoons, usually on ABC is what I watched. And sometimes they would show Schoolhouse Rock cartoons. I'm not sure if your generation has been exposed to that very much, although you might have had some cool English teachers show some cool Schoolhouse Rock cartoons in your class. But virtually anybody who's ever seen the Schoolhouse Rock about conjunctions can remember the song. It goes, "Conjunction, junction, what's your function?" That's like the main refrain that gets sung over and over again. And in that video, in that cartoon, there's a bunch of trains that are linking up because the function of conjunctions are to connect clauses together and to show the relationship between them. So remember, a clause is a group of words that has both a verb and its subject. And sometimes you have more than one clause in a sentence, and that's fine. But you need to have either a conjunction between them that shows the relationship between those clauses, or you could also sometimes use punctuation for that, such as a semicolon, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So if you notice, conjunction here is underlined and it's in blue. That means it's a link. So if you click on this, it will open up this handy-dandy list of conjunctions. It's not like I'm expecting you to study, memorize this, or anything like that. But see if you recognize some conjunctions on here. This list is huge. It might be a little bit intimidating to you. But the cool thing about it is that it divides the conjunctions up between kind of the types of relationships that they show. Because remember, it says here that conjunctions show a relationship between the clauses. So if you're wanting to show agreement, addition, or similarity between your clauses, you would use one of these words, for example. Scrolling down, if you look in the green here, it tells you the relationship type. So this group here shows examples, support, or emphasis. So let me just pull an example here. This word is notably. So if I said, there are several fantastic English teachers at West High. Most notably, there is Miss Harrison, Mr. Costia, Mr. Shockett, and Mr. Foote. Okay, just kidding. I love all the English teachers at West. Those are just the names that I thought of off the top of my head. But you can see that those were two different clauses, and the word notably shows the relationship between them. It signaled to you that the latter part of the sentence is where I was giving examples of the English teachers at West. What else do we have here? We could show cause, we can show opposition. So let's look at this one in reality. Many people think that run-on sentences are okay. In reality, it's a common mistake that people make in their writing. So see how it shows the opposite is true of what many people think, which is what I talked about in the first clause. So I won't go through this in detail, but if you've ever heard a teacher talk about fanboys, this is a common trick that English teachers teach students so that they know their coordinating conjunctions. So these are really common conjunctions right here: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So the first letter of each of those spells fanboys. So a lot of teachers use that to teach students the basic conjunctions. But as you can see, those are only a few out of many, many, many conjunctions. Okay. Now that we know what a clause is and a conjunction is, what the heck is a run-on sentence? A run-on sentence is when multiple clauses are stuck together without conjunctions in between them and or without proper punctuation between them. Okay? And you can hear that they sound like they go on and on. It sounds like a crazy person rambling or something like that until they're blue in the face. So let's read a couple examples and see how we can fix them. The first example says, the fog was thick, he could not find his way home. Okay, how could we fix this one? Well, it's not going to be too difficult. The fog was thick. I could do comma, so he could not find his way home. That's one way I could fix it. Here's another way I could fix it. The fog was thick, period. He could not find his way home. So one way I could fix it would be by throwing a conjunction in between it. And just FYI, before you drop one of the fanboys, one of the coordinating conjunctions, you should always put a comma. Or you could make the second clause its own sentence. So let's back up and see why each of these are clauses. It says the fog was thick. So was is our linking verb. What was? The fog was. So we have the verb and the verb's subject here. So this is a clause. What's the second verb and subject pair? Could not find. Find is the actual action verb, and then could not, those are helping verbs. Well, could technically is the helping verb. Could find, not is describing how he could find, making it negative. Could find, who could find, he could find. So there's your second clause right here. So you need something in between, okay? Either a conjunction, or you should just drop a period and start a whole new sentence there. And there's probably other conjunctions we could put in here too, but so was the first one that came to my mind. All right, let's look at this one. I grabbed my keys, I grabbed my coat, I ran for the door as quickly as possible. Now when I was reading that, I kind of naturally put some pauses in there, but really the writer of this sentence did not give me any pauses, because you know commas can give pauses, and of course conjunctions can cause you to pause, or periods really cause you to pause. So if I read this as it was written, it would actually sound like this. I grabbed my keys, I grabbed my coat, I ran for the door as quickly as possible. Okay, we need some spaces in here because we have lots of different verb subjects pairs. I grabbed, so grabbed would be your verb. Who grabbed? I grabbed. So there's your subject and your verb. What did I grab? My keys. So that's the end of the first clause. I grabbed my coat. So grabbed is your verb in this clause, and I again is your subject. Ran, that's your next action verb, and the subject is I. So here you have 3 clauses, and they're all just smooshed together with nothing in between them. There's lots of ways we could fix this. We could say, I grabbed my keys. I could take this out. I could say, I grabbed my keys and my coat. comma, and I ran for the door as quickly as possible. That's one way you could fix it. What else could we do? Oops, not that. What if I said, I grabbed my keys and my coat, period. I ran for the door as quickly as possible. That's another way you could fix it. What if I said, I'm going to move this onto its own page. Oops. So you can see it all at once. What if I said, I grabbed my keys oh, sorry about that. I grabbed my keys, comma, then I grabbed my coat, comma, then I ran for the door as quickly as possible. So a certain type of conjunction tells you about time, okay? The order that something happened in. And that's what the word then is. It is a conjunction. It tells you that you did this first, and then you did this, and then you did that. So that's the third way that you could fix this one. Again, there's infinity ways that you could fix this. But the point is, you can't leave it like this, where you have nothing in between those clauses. All right, now here is an example straight out of a student daily writing, an anonymous student who shall not be named. They said, I like games and playing Fortnite and APB and Call of Duty 3, and I can't wait till Call of Duty 4 comes, and movies, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and my favorite movie is Austin Powers. That's how I feel after I read that, like I need to take a deep breath. So let's look at one way we could fix this. It's going to involve breaking things into multiple sentences. Now, one thing is true. You don't want to say and over again and over again and over again. It's okay to use these conjunctions, but you need to use them in a logical way, okay? I like games. Maybe instead of and here, we could say I like playing games such as Fortnite and APB and Call of Duty. Okay, how about we drop one of these ands and put a comma, because we're making a list, right? I love playing games such as Fortnite, APB, and Call of Duty 3. I don't know what APB is. I'm sure somebody will pause the video and tell me right now. Now we don't need this and anymore because we're starting a new sentence. I can't wait till Call of Duty 4 comes out. We'll say comes out because I think that's what this person meant. That's the end of that thought, okay? The next thing this student launches into is talking about movies. So maybe we stop that sentence and say, I also like movies such as Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I'm going to show you a trick now. We could leave it like this. We could say, I also like movies such as Star Wars: The Force Awakens. We would need a comma here. And my favorite movie is Austin Powers. And of course, we'd want to end with a period. That's one way you could do it. You could also say, I also like movies such as Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And then we could replace this comma and this and with a semicolon. That's what the semicolon does. Semicolon is magical. Okay? Because if you have two clauses that are related to each other, such as, say, this person's talking about movies now. I also like movies such as Star Wars Force Awakens. That's one. My favorite movie is Austin Powers. That's two. But these are related to each other. They're both about movies. If you have two clauses that are related to each other and you want to keep them in the same sentence, you can drop a semicolon in between them. Fun fact. So that's one way that you could fix this mess of a run-on sentence. Now, of course, there are other errors that I'm sure you can see here. So some things aren't capitalized, which we would want capitalized. Of course, the name of a video game is a proper noun, so these should be capitalized. So a movie, that should be capitalized. And Star Wars is two different words. So these are other edits you can make. My favorite movie is Austin Powers. There. And now we turned this into this. So as you're revising your own draft, make sure that you don't have run-on sentences. Sometimes if you're kind of confused a little bit about the clauses and things like that, it's easier to find them just by reading it out loud. If a sentence has you out of breath at the end because it gets going on and on and on, and you can just feel that it's dragging on and on, that's a good indication that it might be a run-on sentence. So you might look at how you can break up the thoughts into separate sentences or by using conjunctions.